to this episode of ADHD Eavesdrop. Today, I had the absolute pleasure of chatting with Rachel Moore, therapist, creative, and fellow ADHDer, to her late diagnosis story, how her own creative journey shaped her therapy practice, and why working with artists and neurodivergent folks is so close to her heart. It's a fun, insightful ride, so get cozy, settle in, and be that butterfly on the wall with us. Rachel, I always like to start with the ADHD story and the diagnosis story when I have a guest who has ADHD because, it helps us all feel a little bit less like we're alone out there.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I'm super happy to be here. Thank you so much for the intro. Okay, my ADHD story. I was not officially diagnosed until I was 45, and even then, I know I didn't take a test or anything. I just talked to a psychiatrist, and he's like, "Oh yeah, very clear. This has been you your whole life." I'm like, "Yes, I know." Thank you for verifying that. I will say that my dad was diagnosed when he was 50, and a lot of things made sense in his life. And I think that part of the reason why I was diagnosed so late was that I don't think that he wanted to believe that I would have the same struggles that he had in life, which I totally understand that parents want to save their kids from something like that. But that didn't, negate the fact that I was having trouble. So, reaching back, I think the first real indicator for me was in 5th grade. I remember I was like failing in geography because I wasn't like doing my homework. And I was always really, really great at tests. Maybe you or people listening can identify with that. Some of us are, some of us aren't. I was wonderful at testing. Like we would do the standardized tests and I would be in the 99th percentile like all the time. And I never did homework.
Nice.
Because I'd go home and like I had a young brother and sister, they're doing stuff and it's fun and there's the TV and there's like, food and family and things happening, and like to actually sit away by myself doing homework just felt really weird.
Did your ADHD have any influence on your decision to do what you do today, which
Ooh, that's a
is
great
tell us all
question.
about it?
Yeah, okay. So I'm a therapist based in San Diego, California. I'm a psychotherapist and I work primarily with creative people. So that's in my history too. I've played piano since I was 7, and I played saxophone in high school, and I played drums, and then I started singing when I was 30, and have sung opera and all kinds of stuff like that. And and then my undergraduate degrees in creative writing, and before that I had a 14-year career as a newspaper copy editor before being a therapist. Yes, I do think that ADHD definitely played into that job in particular, because the greatest thing about that job was that we would come in, I would write headlines and design pages, and then the paper would be sent out. So we'd come in, work on the paper, start again new the next day. Absolutely fresh, absolutely new, start all over again. Deadlines, like hard deadlines that you had to meet. And so you knew when your work was beginning and you knew when your work was ending. That,
Novelty, urgency,
all of it,
creativity,
all
all of
of
the
it.
things.
Yeah. So that was great. The bummer part was that I worked swing shifts, so usually like 3 p.m. to midnight, and I worked holidays, which worked for me for a while. And then I got married. My husband's like, "Yeah, this is kind of hard." I'm like, "Yeah, I don't blame you." So around that time, decided to switch careers. So now, same type of things, being a therapist, like you never know what's going to be in front of you. So the novelty is there. The fun and the emotional intensity is there, probably for obvious reasons. And I run my own business. I have my own private practice, which I love. Like my whole goal in life, number one goal, is to never have to work for anybody ever again. I don't know if that's going to happen, but that is my goal. And so far, I've been licensed for 8 years now. So far, that's been the case. So fingers
Yay.
crossed. Yeah.
Well, then I don't foresee any problems with that. Now that
Because
I
the
have
world
said,
is really stable. Anyway, go ahead.
yeah, exactly, exactly. I'm just going to say, you're going to do perfectly fine. Don't worry. You're never going to work for somebody else again.
Not if I can help it. Not if I can help it.
Well, and I love the fact that you work with creative folks. I myself was in band in high school, was in musicals and in plays in high
Woohoo.
school. Have as an adult been in plays. I've been in Hamlet, Shakespeare. I've, I draw, I paint, I love to sing, all of the things, art and ADHD actually kind of really go hand in hand.
It's funny because the more I am doing this work and working with creative people, I'm like, I thought I was working with creative people, and I think that's true. And I also may be really working with a lot of neurodivergent people. Maybe a 100% crossover, I'm not sure.
I don't know if it's a 100%, but I'll tell you, I don't know, you didn't mention theater, did you?
Mm,
Are you
I'm a bad actor.
So I have noticed, like, when you're in theater, it everybody has got some sort of neurodivergence, and so you just a bunch of weird folks, like, hanging out together and having a great time, right?
Yeah, I've been backstage, for theater, so yes, I know exactly what you're talking about, yes.
So how does that creativity so when you say, "I work with creative people," do you use creativity in how you work with them, or do you just work with people who are creative?
Well, I say, like, for example, I'm not an art therapist, I'm a therapist who works with artists. So, it's like it's a funny question actually because I think most of therapy is creative, right? I always have 2 things going on, at least 2 things going on at the same time. 1, listening to the person, and 2, I'm thinking about what this means and where I might wanna go with it. So that in itself is really a creative act. So that's creation, right? That's like,
Oh,
okay, I'm doing this thing and then oh, where's it gonna go? And I'm feeling into it and getting that intuition and stuff like that. Now I do have some modalities that I use, which again help me. Like, I talked earlier about the deadlines being helpful with my newspaper job. With therapy, it's really helpful for me to have some structured stuff that I can rely on. And we don't have to use it all the time, but and we don't have to go into it, in depth here, but just for people who may know, I use EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. I use brain spotting, which is similar to that. And recently, I've been doing some training on with parts work, so like IFS or internal family systems, and all of those gonna have like to various degrees different types of structure so that we can know what we're doing, where we're going. Because I'm kind of afraid and I'm so funny, like, I've been doing this, I've been doing EMDR since 2015, but I will still have my little notebook and, like, my little manual. I'm like, "Okay, where are we in the process?" Because I know me. I know I'm
and that
creative and I'm ADHD, so I may just go all over the place, which I don't really want. I don't know that that's what we're should be doing here. It should be a little more, formal.
yeah,
So,
I've
yeah.
I've heard that EMDR is pretty intense, that it can be very intense.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I mean, I'm a trauma therapist, essentially, so it sounds I don't know. It sounds a certain way, but we all have trauma. We call it like there's either big T trauma or little T trauma, right? So big T trauma is like, natural disasters or big things like that. Little T trauma is more about some of those maybe relational developmental things. So that means when you're a kid, things that aren't great and kind of happen over and over and over. That's also can be traumatic. So yeah, so ultimately, I'm a trauma therapist, though that's not really a great sell if you're trying to work with creatives.
because, creative folks, they don't have any trauma, right? I mean, what is it
I
with creativity? It's like
Mhm.
trauma breeds creativity.
I have an answer for that. I have an
Good.
answer for that. Okay, yeah, yeah, and I wrote a blog post about it, like, okay, so I talked to this therapist, physician named Gabor Mate. I don't know if anybody out there knows him. He's kind of famous in the therapy world. I think he grew up in Hungary, like, during the war. Really cool guy who works a lot with addiction and things like that. He wrote a book called, When the Body Says No, and it's about how our bodies can react to trauma and things like that. So in the book, he talks about a cellist, I believe, and I think she was in France. Her name is Jacqueline Dupre, and talks about how expressive and emotive she was in her music because she was so repressed growing up, right? Her parents were so repressive to her. And so I got to meet this guy, this Gabor Mate. I got to meet him and we got to ask questions. So I raised my hand and I said, I said, okay, I and a lot of my clients feel like we are creative because of our trauma. Do you know what I mean? Like this happened to me, and so I gotta write about it and I gotta talk about it. And he immediately was like, no, 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 that's wrong. And I was like, yay, tell me what's right. So and I agree with what he said, and I think it's really great. And he said, "Your creativity doesn't come from your trauma, it comes from your sensitivity," right? And if we think about that, just going to think about that for a minute, like, what does that mean? Well, to me, that means like, oh, I'm really sensitive to music and art and Shakespeare and, the world. right? One of my friends, we have a joke. She works in psychedelic assisted therapy. One day she just looks at me and she goes, "You don't need drugs, do you?" I said, "No, I don't think I do. I
You're like
don't
the
need to be."
things that
Yeah,
happen in my head.
yeah, right? Like, this is wild. I have another friend who's really into, like, like new agey type stuff, like, ooh, woo-woo stuff, and every time she tells me things, I'm like, "Sure, I believe it.
Makes perfect
Why
sense to
not?
me. Why
Yeah,
not?
I'm open. I don't know." So anyway,
Not that
yeah.
that's not, believable or anything like that, but there is something to be said about possibly having a connection between ADHD and gullibility.
Well, that reminds me of how oftentimes ADHD folks get hooked up with narcissists, right? Do you know this? Yeah, you know about this? Yeah, because we're like, we just believe that people are who they are, say they are, and do what they say they're gonna do, because that's how we are, right? It's like when we're unmasked, right? We're like, well, I'm just me,
Right?
right?
Why would he lie to me? Why wouldn't they just tell me, you know?
Right, just say what's on your mind. I don't understand.
Or if he's gaslighting me, well, I guess I needed to be lit.
Yeah, it's a thing. It's a thing. But back to the creativity. Yeah, he said, it's because and he made an example. He's like, if you have an injury to your leg or whatever, people will feel that differently depending on how sensitive they are. Some kind of example like that. Just like you're gonna feel things in the world deeper because you're sensitive, not because of trauma. Now, you may be traumatized more or in a different way because you are sensitive, right? Which is why I think that like I'm very like neurodivergent affirming in my practice because I don't want to add to the shame, that comes along with ADHD and other neurodivergences. Like there's no point. Like that's silly. This is just the way our brain works. Like,
Well, that
yeah.
brings me to that whole your perception is your reality. And so, what may from the outside not look like a traumatizing event for a neurotypical kiddo may not be a traumatizing event. But because the perception of a neurodiverse kid is so different,
Mhm.
you may have a very traumatizing event there.
Exactly. Everybody will have a different reaction. And you see this a lot with siblings, right? They grew up in the same household and yet because of differences like age and temperament and neurodiversity, like they will experience things differently. Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And so again, it's not I really feel like that's a important point to put forth because about trauma and creativity because it's okay. You don't have to suffer to make art. You
Hmm.
can be healthy, happy, and I actually run groups based on the artist way. I'm talking about some of these concepts, right? You can be healthy, happy, productive, and be an artist. And yeah.
So you don't have to be the struggling, suffering artist to be the artist,
Now that may be getting you other things in life.
right?
I don't want to say, like if you want the sympathy you're liking and things like that, that's fine. But
Absolutely.
yeah, as far as the art, no, it doesn't have to be that
Well,
way.
and I find that like with my art, that my emotions at the time that I'm creating that art has an effect on what I'm doing. So as you're talking about that sensitivity, I'm thinking I'm very sensitive to my emotions and my surroundings and what's going on in my life. And so then I am putting it in
Yeah.
to the paper. And if I wasn't as sensitive, there would be nothing to put there, right?
Perhaps, or it would just look different. And that's what Gabor Mate said too. He said,
Right.
the medium may change, the way you do art may change depending on your trauma, your sensitivities. But yeah, it's all you. And I like back to the artist way too. I like what she says, like everything you do is original because you are original, right? Like there's
Yeah,
only one of you.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I love the difference between different people's art styles. Everybody feels like, "Oh, I'm not as good of an artist here, I'm not as good of an artist there," or whatever. But if you look at it, everybody's got their own style, and so
Mhm.
you really cannot compare unless you're trying to duplicate somebody else's work.
Right, unless you're all trying to do something exactly like a paint and sip or whatever. It reminds me of, have you heard of, and if you haven't, I highly recommend it. I love it. The Portrait Artist of the Year. Have you heard of this TV show?
No.
Okay. Okay. It is a British show and It's called Portrait Artist of the Year. They bring in artists and then they bring in like one celebrity for each 3 artists. And every person, every time they turn around the paintings at the end, that they are so different. Now, everybody was there at the same time, on the same day, with the same lighting, with the same person.
Yeah.
And it's just really cool to see that, like, as a reminder, like, oh, yeah, like, no,
Yeah, your art is as unique as you are. Absolutely.
exactly.
So, what made you choose to work with artists? I mean, because we are our own breed. I mean, I was a teacher and an administrator, so I can't say that I was a professional artist, but I've always done art and I would consider myself an artist. What
Yeah.
brought you to that?
Well, it was funny because after I graduated with my master's in therapy, I was like, I was like, who am I gonna work with? What's my niche gonna be? I don't know. Here's the thing: when you're a therapist, since in California, we have to have 3,000 hours of supervised work before we can even sit for our licensing exam. Which on the one hand is good, I suppose. There's a lot of problems with it because we usually don't get paid or not paid that much, and so it's a bit elitist, and there's issues, right?
Yeah, our coaching is the same. It's just on a mini level.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so the good and bad about that is I had some good internships and I had some bad internships. There are good witches and bad witches, not that I would call anybody a witch. But anyway, I was like just I was discouraged from that. Like I knew, like I had this feeling, I was telling my first private practice person, I didn't stay there very long, but I was like, hey, up to that point, I'd done a bunch of meetup groups with around art. I had already been doing artist way groups. I had this whole like pool of artists. I can't do therapy with people I know, but they know people, right? And so I told my supervisor, I was like, "Hey, yeah, I want a niche in working with artists." And she's like, "No, you're an intern, and so you have to be broad." And I'm like, "Why? I'm not going to be helpful for everybody, and not everybody's going to want to see me. It's not going to be a good fit." So I eventually did get into a private practice where they encouraged that, and I went all in, and it's been great. Like, it's amazing. People will call me and say, like, "Hey, I wanna pay your full fee because you work with writers," and I don't think there's anybody else in San Diego who leads with that, working with creatives. Up in LA, there's several people, as you might imagine, which makes sense, but it just surprises me. It's like, I don't know, just for me personally, it's like, why wouldn't you?
That's exactly what I'm thinking. Of course, of any population, the creatives are going to be the best population to work with. Come
They
on.
are! They're so great. I love them, and it saves so much time. Like, I tell this story, like, I was with my therapist at the time years ago, and so it's not her fault. She just isn't in the same, mindset. Because I said something like, "Oh, a friend of mine, she got a digital piano, and I sat down and played it, and it felt just like a real piano." And this was mind-blowing for me because since moving to California, I grew up in Idaho, we have lots of space there. In California, we do not have as much space. And so I always thought, like, gosh, I'm never gonna be able to own a piano, right? I'm never gonna be able to have that feeling because when I sit down at a piano, like, it's like insta calm. You know what I mean? It's like I am chill. And I was so sad about that. Well, now I own a digital piano and it's great. But anyway, when I told this to my therapist, she was like, "Oh, so like that's like important to you?" Or you know what I mean? Like she didn't get it. She didn't get like what that means. And I
Yeah.
even go as far to say, and I see this being true in many cases, either literally or figuratively. Art can be life or death. I mean, I really feel like it can be that important to people. And certainly to me, it's like one of the number one reasons to be alive in the world, right?
I agree. I agree. And,
Yeah.
like, I can't see, like, choosing to be like, "I wanna work with all the math and science people," you know? Not that we need them, we definitely need them, but, like, I art is its own very special thing. I know that when I worked with kids in the high school, a lot of times, the kid would have an ADHD or have a learning disability or something, but he'd be a great artist, right? First of all, it was a place where he could receive a positive feedback. Great job. You did a great job on that. You did, like it's the only time you hear positives. And the other times you see that the art, it's what keeps them going throughout the day. The doodling, the just being able to draw will keep them sane, essentially.
Yes. Yes. I mean, that's how I survived high school. I was in jazz band and symphonic band and marching band, and I had all my friends there, and I loved what we were doing. Had a great, instructor. Like, Yeah, it was the best time.
Yeah, it wasn't okay, so marching band. Tell me that that does not, like, just mark all the boxes for an ADHD.
Do you know what? I'm literally going this weekend, I'm going to visit my marching band buddies, and I graduated in 1992, so
That's funny. You gotta marching band was great. To be honest, I didn't like symphonic band so much, but,
It's different,
I
yeah.
I wanted to march, and so I would do the other so that I could march because I loved it.
Well, and it's funny, like, what I did for at least 2 of the 3 years in marching band, I marched the bass drum one year, that was that was interesting, but the other 2 years was actually really fun because I was in the auxiliary percussion, so I didn't have to march, but we pretty much had our own little world down there, right? We were like
Yeah.
had the xylophones set up, the triangles. I remember I was one of the there were 2 of us who had played piano, and so we always got put on the xylophone and stuff, which I totally get, but I really wanted to play the triangle, at least once, you know?
Rock that triangle, Rachel, rock it.
I really oh my gosh, one of my clients, I can't remember who it was or what type of music, maybe they were talking about, music in Brazil, they said is really triangle heavy. I'm like, "That's amazing.
More cowbell, more triangle.
More
That's so
triangle."
funny. I was a drum major,
Oh,
so
wow. I tried out, but I didn't make it. That's okay.
that was a lot of fun. But we did a lot of hanging out with the drums on the side or the percussion on the
Yeah.
sidelines,
Oh, yeah, we're the cool
because
kids, yeah.
yeah, you have the pit, right?
That's
And
what
so
we were the pit, yeah.
exactly.
Oh my gosh, I have a funny pit story. Do you wanna hear it?
Okay.
Okay, first I have to ask you if we can swear on this program, and if we can't, it's okay.
It's okay, you can swear.
Okay. We're at a competition. We're in Pasco, Washington. We drove all the way there. We're at this competition, and so I'm in there in the pit in the front. And then, of course, the drum major's on a little podium right in front of us, right? It's my friend Derek. He's the one who's getting everybody together this weekend. Okay, so he's the drum major, He's like, this is what he does.
You have to tell him you met another drum major.
I did. I mean, he will be excited. So he says, band, horns up, right? And everybody's supposed to get their horns up. So he says, band, horns up. And then for some reason, one of the cymbal players goes, crash.
My god!
So here's the sequence of things that I hear sitting there. So I hear Derek say, band, horns up. Then I hear crash. And then I hear Derek say, fuck. And that's how we started our competition.
And you're like, "And we are off."
And you know what? We won that thing. We won it
Nice. Nice. Yeah,
with
that's
all,
funny.
even with the shaky start.
Yeah, shaky start. Well, and it's funny, my son also has ADHD. My whole family has ADHD, let's be honest here. And he was a drummer. He was a drum major. He won best drum major one year when he was doing it, but
Yay.
band is in my whole family. My husband is a drummer. My son is a drummer. My daughter played clarinet. I played cornet. I played piano for a minute, and then I did not play piano.
Yeah. It's
But
kind of a
so
beast.
so would you say artistically and creativity wise, music is your genre of choice?
It's tough because I go back and forth between music and writing. I will tell you this though, for whatever reason, because like I said, my undergraduate degree is in creative writing, and I've been writing ever since I was like 5. My first published piece was a pamphlet when I was 5 years old, encouraging my mom and my stepdad to name my upcoming sister little baby Tina. I was apparently a propagandist from an early age.
Very good.
Yeah, her name is Stephanie, and she's very nice. But anyway, so yeah, between writing and music, but I'll say this. So with writing, maybe because I had my career as a journalist for so long, I will be paid to write. Pay me, I'll write. I don't care. Whatever, no big deal. Especially with singing, because it's such a like you are the instrument, right? When you sing.
Mm.
With singing, I do not want to be paid. And that's been true for 20 years. And I've been doing a lot of singing and I have never been paid. I know that may sound weird, maybe to some people, like my dad. He's like, if I had a voice like that, I would make a lot of money. Yeah. I'm like, okay, cool. For me, it's just too close. Like it's too close to that sensitivity that we were talking about earlier, right?
Mm.
It's too sensitive. Not in a bad way. When I say too, I don't mean it negative. I just mean like too sensitive to sell out for me, just talking about me. So they mean different things to me. I enjoy both of them, writing and music, but those are definitely my 2 lanes. Whenever not whenever, but oftentimes when I do visual art, I start crying.
Wow, beautiful. I,
Not in a good way.
well, but I mean, I'm sure it's pretty intense, your writing. I team taught a class of slam poetry when I was working as a teacher,
Oh,
and that was it was an amazing thing, and I don't know how much poetry you write, but slam poetry, there's something about it. That was probably the most excited I gotten about writing in a long time.
okay, yeah. I haven't done slam poetry. My creative writing degree was focused in poetry, and actually, I didn't write much poetry afterward because I'm like, oh, when's the occasion? Especially with ADHD, right? It's like, well, there's no structure here in life to write poetry. I don't know. However, interestingly, when I was working in the newspaper and writing headlines, that's when it came into play because you have to find the correct word, correct, accurate. And if you're like me, you want it to sound good. And I always had to like be careful not to fall too far on the sounds good part, you know? It's like, no, it still has to be accurate.
And I'd be like, "Alliteration, I want
Oh,
alliteration."
yes. Oh my gosh. And I have to tell you, headline writers, we are the biggest punners that you have ever met. It's like, you can't control us. We're out of control.
Yeah, it's so funny. And I'll tell
Yeah,
you, I
so
think
it's
I
fun.
wrote some of the best poetry I ever wrote when I was in the middle of postpartum depression, talking about, like, processing emotions, right?
Yeah.
Using that writing to process all that stuff. I wrote some beautiful stuff. Now you're saying I didn't have to have that trauma and that suffering to write those beautiful
You could write
poems.
it today. I'm telling you. You could write that poetry today.
Oh my gosh. Well, Rachel, we have had a great conversation. And I just want to ask one last question before we go. And that question is for you, if you were able to have like the corner on artists in California, we'll just give you California for right now. Okay.
Just California, you
You
know?
have you have the entire population of California and there's a few artists there. One or two, I think.
Okay. Just a few
I'm
out of,
teasing.
what,
There are a
30
lot of
million?
artists there.
Yeah.
So you have a full audience of artists and you're given 2 minutes
Mm.
to talk about mental health and artistry.
Is that a
What
question?
would you go
So I would run away screaming because there are 30 million people staring at me. No, I have to tell you though, it's so funny. Even just the other day, I was like, you know what? I don't like doing public speaking. What I like, and I did this thing the other day that I had never done before, which is that I went and did a presentation, just some coping mechanism therapy typey things with a nonprofit board of directors. So there were like 6 of people there, and we just, sat around and I gave my presentation, but it was interactive. That's why I love podcasts and podcast interviews. Like, it's like I need something to bounce off of. So to ask me that question, I'm like, I don't know. I'm gonna have a meltdown now. Don't mind.
how about
Was that
this?
2
Did you have
minutes?
a
I don't
good
know.
time, Rachel?
Oh my gosh, I had such a fantastic time. I have to tell you, I will tell you that this is the most unmasked I've ever been in a podcast interview, and it's been so much fun. So thank you for giving me that opportunity just to be myself.
I'm so honored to hear that. Thank you for bringing that to the table. I appreciate it. So, thank you again so much for being on today, Rachel. And for our butterflies on the wall who are listening in, if they like what they hear, we hope that they'll subscribe and like and do all those things. And until then, we'll see you next time.